Okay, we're up to Chafam mid base. We're about 7, 8 lines to the bottom. Boy Rami Barchama. Boy Rami Barchama. Hoyu Muchzokim B'Tavla Shehi Shalah. We're muchzik that this tablet that should belong to her. The get kosev aleha, and there's a get written on the tablet. Barihi yoytze mitachas yadai, and it's now coming from underneath his hand. Now, in order for him to divorce her, he's got to give something that's his. So if this tablet belonged to her, and he wrote a get on it and gave it back to her, it would not be a good get. She would have to go ahead and be makna the tablet to him, and then he would give it back to her. But she would have to go ahead and make it his. So that's the crux of the discussion over here.
Or after they wrote the
again, she has to give it to even after it will be, as long as the nesina b'shas the nesina it belonged to him, you'd be okay. Mahu mi'aminon aknuya akni solei. Do we say she was maknit to him? Because after all, we are muchzik, it was hers, and now we find it by him. How did it end up him? She must have been maknit to him. Dilma lo yada laknuye. Maybe she doesn't know how to be makna, which is kind of difficult to understand. So Baruch Hashem for Taisvis. We're going to beat Rabbi to the punch. Okay. Isha lo yada laknuye. Second Taisvis from the bottom. Pirish bidavo shehu machzila. She doesn't know the kinyan that's, you know what? Backsies. But like Gomra umaknale el b'torish she'ela mashilasaloi. In other words, she doesn't know the concept of being makna to him, al-manas that he's going to give it back to her, and she's just basically going to lend it to him because she knows it's coming back. Give me your tablet in order for me to go ahead and give it back to you and divorce you. This is going to sound really good, right? Let me. It didn't have enough marital problems as it is. And do me a favor. I'm too cheap to go ahead and write my own paper. Give me your thing. Be mocked it to me so I can go ahead and divorce you, but then give it back to you. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, but again, we had a discussion if she paid for it, right? We had a discussion that they were. That's the difference. Okay, so he's asked a very good kasha. What's the difference than yesterday's daf where we asked the question? We said, "L'chari, she's paying for it, so where's the nesina?" So how do we answer? Okay, I won't put you on the spot. We answered. Good questions, right? It's always much harder to give an answer than a question, right? We said the din of hefker, best and hefker, correct? In other words, Bezdin could take her money, be mafker, and give it to him. You only say hefker and best and hefker by mumminess, by gelt. You wouldn't say it by an object. So this is a tavla, so memela. That would answer your kasha, right? Very geschmack. Okay, so the tavla, you don't say hefker and best and hefker on the tavla, or else we don't need her kinyan. We wouldn't need a kinyan at all. We'd remove her totally from the process. Go ahead, take it away, and go through the thing. That's what we would do.
That's what the
it's called the Mekadesh. I died to Rabban Mekadesh. What? No, we said no. We said no. Going to say Kesef be a Mayikal Meimar. So what do we say? They may be a snus, but speaking about that's kedushin.
This is about the actual. Wasn't guilt. It was a ring or something.
That's Kesef. It's Shavah Kesef. That's Shavah Kesef Kesef, right? I guess not. I guess you don't say it. You don't say Kesef. You don't say Hefka. No, you're mixing up two things. Hefka best and Hefka is not a dinner called the Mekadesh Adai to Rabban Kaddish. You know, they. In other words, you go ahead. You get married on my das, so I can be nullify your marriage. And whatever. There's that. It's two different dinner, Mayor. Two different dinner. Okay. So and the commonality is Bezdin has power, but again, the two different dinner. So now. So l'chayra. So what's Tosfos' answer, guys? And for Tosfos, of course, woman knows kinyanim. Stam is like if she's going to sell you something, she knows to go ahead and be makna to you. You know, she knows business. We're speaking over here about she's being makna you her avla for you to write a get to give it back to her, but she has to give it yours, and that's very very close to she'ela lending something to somebody, and that's what Tosfos answers that problem. Back in the Gemara. So Omer Abaye Toshma. Afu Hayed, even Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba he was made. Al Kfar Katan Shahaya B'Tzad Yerushalayim. There's a small shtetl on the side of Yerushalayim. There was a zaking there. By Yamalvil Chol Bnei Akfar. he would go ahead, right, and he would lend all the people the kaisev b'ksav yadai, and he'd write with his ksav v'achirim choismin, right, and others would go ahead and they would sign the shtar. Now, who's the onus to writing the shtar on, the malva or the loiva? The loiva. The loiva, you got to pay for it. The loiva, the makna, the one who's gaining. In other words, so it's on that person to go ahead and do it, right? So now, who's the one writing it in this scenario? The malva. The malva is doing it, right? You need the loiva, who's the mikna, to go ahead and write it. So the same thing over here. We say that what? That he must have, the old man must be makna to them. So too over here, the isha must be makna to her. Says the Gemara, Meravu, my kusha. Dilma zakin shiny, maybe zaking's different, right? Shiny, the yad laknuya, he knows. In other words, he knows the distinction based upon Tosfos between a kinyan and she'ela, right? That fine distinction between the two. He knows the difference. Very good. So back to Ashayla. In this case, would it be a good get or not? El Amarava mehacha. Arev hayoytze lacha chisum. Now, what's a Arev? It's a cosigner. He's the one who facilitates the loan. For all intents and purposes, he's the loiva. In other words, the loan is taking place because there's a cosigner. So he's the Sefer HaMikvah. He's the one who has to pay for it. Now, this person, what he did was he signed after the Edom had signed. He didn't sign beforehand. He signed afterwards. The Arev. Why do we know it about the difference between a milval peh and a milval b'shtar? We know a milval peh you cannot collect from mishubadim. You can only collect from unencumbered property. Why? Because it doesn't have a coil. It does people. In other words, the people who buy the property, they can possibly be aware by a milval peh to go ahead and buyer be aware that there's a lien on this property. Mashain came with Adam sign on a star. Then there's a lien on the property. There's a coil goes out. Buyer beware, and therefore you chance to lose the property in case what? In case someone shows up. Okay, that's now these people signed after the chisum shtaris, after the coal went out. So therefore, says the Gemara, if that's the case, you would go ahead what? And you would collect from nechasim b'nei chayrin. So too over here, what's the tushtel? He's the one that has to write the shtar. So it must be that he somehow is makna. So Rav Ashi, my kushya, dilma gavra shiny, the other laknuye. In the first place is with zaken. Not so maybe it's say, a zaken, he knows, but a regular yid doesn't know. So comes along Rava and says, no, it doesn't have to be a zaken. Even a regular yid knows. So if a regular yid knows, and he should also knows the distinction between a kinyan and she'ela. And what's the answer? No. Maybe only men know, and women don't know. Men who are used to go ahead and be oisik b'masu mata, they used to be involved in business, they would know the difference. But a woman who pashut is we don't want to be, in the woke world, we don't want to say it, but the ones who are busy vacuuming and cleaning and cooking, that had a little side hustle on the side, making, whatever. But okay, guys, don't tell your wives. Ella, so guys, so back by the same question. Does a woman know the distinction between she'ela and this kinyan? Elam Ravashi mehacha. Isha kaiseves eskita. A woman can write her get. Ba'ish kaises es shayvroi, and the man can write his shayver. Shein kim haget elam chaysamav. The king is chaysamav. So obviously, if she's writing it, what does she know? She's going to be makna it to her husband, and can push it to Shiloh. Okay, we have a little bit about the main sugya that we're about to do now is in Perik HaZoyrek. The eighth Perik of Gitin is called Perik HaZoyrek. Usually you learn it in Elul's man or it's a short man, and it seems to be a Perik that many of us remember. It's the Perik of Kinyanim, has to do with the Perik of Kinyanim, and we know that it says v'chasad la sefer krisis v'nasam biyada. You write a sefer krisis and you put it in her hand. Her hand is lav dafka her hand, but her rishus. If she owns a chutzner and the man puts the get in her chutzner, the get is received, right? The get is received and she's divorced. Now, there are certain parameters, however, that constitute a chutzner. It has to be mishtameres, just like in your hand it's watched, it has to be watched as well. It can't be mehaleches, it can't be going. And so therefore, in other words, you need a viable chutzner for what? For her to be divorced. With that in mind, let's begin. Amar Rava. Kasav la get, v'nasna bi'at avdoi. He writes a get, and he gives the get to the eved. The kasav la shtar matana alav, and he's kind of shtar matana alav on the eved. So the eved is holding the get. And now an eved, we know, guys, is mukish lakarka. Just like a karka is what eved kanani. Just like a karka is acquired kesef shtar v'chazaka, who adin is this eved kanani. Now he goes ahead, he gives the get to the eved, and then he goes ahead and writes a shtar matana. Now a shtar for karka is a viable kinyan, and he's giving as a matana present, he's giving this eved. So now, if the eved belongs to the isha, and the eved is mukish the karka, and we can view the eved as a chatzar, then she should be divorced.
But the eved was there before.
This is a very famous sugya. The sugya of you're right. You remember this. Okay, so now, kana asu. As soon as she acquires him, umiskareshes boy, right? And she's miskarish. Let's see Rashi here, guys. Let's see Rashi. So, kinasahu le'eved b'shtar matana zeh. She acquires the eved with the shtar matana. V'aget shebiyadai, and the get that's in his hand. Davila hay eved kechatzeira. This eved is like her chatzer. The gita v'chatzeira born lo ke'achad. And the get and the chatzar come at the same time.
Does she acquire the chatzar? Yeah.
It has to.
It comes hers.
The eved becomes her, and the mela, the get is in a chatzar. Frag dov, what are you talking about? And for the Gemara, chiddush nifla, big chiddush, right? We're going to say gita v'chatzeira b'yin ke'echad. Gita v'chatzeira b'yin ke'echad. It's not such a strange thing. If you ever go ahead and Masha kana eved kana rabbi, Masha kana isha kana baila. How does she ever get divorced? How do you ever divorce? How can you ever get shukah to the eved, guys? He's yours. He's yours, right? So when you give it to him, he's yours. Yeah. What do you have to say? Gita v'yadai b'yin ke'echad, and same thing by a divorce. If you give it directly to the woman, the same thing, right? And so this is a little extension over that with just a little extra kanesh that it's a chatzar. Guys, you good? It's a lamdish, very lamdish sugya. This is shtar matana. Again, you need a kinyan over here because it's a karka. It's kesef shtar kazam. The shtar over here is the kinyan for Yankel for the kinyan. So now, by doing this now, here's so the problem. So now you understand the mechanics. What's the problem, guys? How is this ever a chatzar? In other words, Gudi is mukish lakarka, but 1 second, doesn't he walk? Says the Gemara V'amai. Why should she acquire chatzam al lechasi? The chatzam al leches loy kana, right? Says Rashi. The chiyam rabbana chatzer shalom kana loy lav b'chatzam al leches amur. The shiny mekarka denied him and mekarka denied. There's a difference between karka that moves and karka that doesn't move. Rabbi Gufa Amar the like kind of b'shnai marksim, and Rav himself says that shnai marksim. In other words, Rav is the Mari the Shmaitzer, guys. Rav is the master of the sugi, and he's the one who says that she's divorced. How's she divorced? Because he's a good chatzah, right? And Rav himself says a chatzah malachas is not a chatzah because it's the difference between karka denied and karka denied. Right? When we say that Yoda Isra boy a chatzar, it's something that doesn't move, and this is moving. So Fred Gemara Kasha, Rabbi L'Shitasai, she shouldn't be divorced because the Eved's not a good chatzar when he's moving. The Chitema, what might you say? When he's standing still and now he's not maleches. Rava himself says, Kol Shilu Mahalech Lekana, anyone that who can move and doesn't acquire it, if he stops and sits, he doesn't acquire it. In other words, if he has the ability to move If he has the ability to move, then what? Then will work. So back to the class. So how can Rabbi say she's divorced? Says the Gemara. The halacha is that speaking when he's tied up. So if he's tied up, then what? He's not a chatzim al leftes. Now we have the sugi in Baba Kama, right? And Gitin. You need one more thing, guys. It has to be mishleres midaita, and that has to be sleeping. Look at Rashi, Taisvus. The hilchos of a kafus v'yosha beinin. Not only do you need tied up, in addition you need him sleeping. Kidamashal kaman ba'zayrik. Doma kasav l'gef v'nasim b'yad avda yashon misham rasoi. If he's sleeping and he's watched, how is that get? Near, if he's awake, ain't a get. Because then the chutz that's being watched, but shloi l'daita because he's watching himself. So therefore, Toitz is here just a little kanech. It's not enough kafis. You would need yoshan as well.
Can we say that the get was written on the Evan?
No, that's the previous Gemara.
Right. So
It's not written on the what?
Also malachas.
You gave that wasn't also chutzner. You gave her a hold as a get. That wasn't chutzner. That wasn't chutzner. That wasn't chutzner. That was you gave the eved like a parah. You gave the parah. He is the get. When it's written on his hand, he's the get. Right.
How can you give over sleeping at the same time?
You tie him up. He's sleeping. And then he has the get in his hand.
You tie him up and he's sleeping.
He's tied up. He's sleeping. He's a viable chutzner. So he's tied up. He's practically okay. Harold, watch. I tie him up. I give him an Ambien. I go ahead and I give a shtar matana to the woman that this guy belongs to you. He's holding a get. Bye bye. That's the case. I mean, it could be Ambien as Xanax, Klukideus. Now, says the Gemara Vaita. Okay. Guys, good? Very good. Says the Gemara Vaita. V'amarava, kosav la get, v'nasta b'chatzeroi. Right. If someone writes a get and puts it in his chatzer, the kosav la shtar matana alav, and now he goes ahead and he gives her the chatzer, the lacha is, kanasu, she's kainet, u'miskaresh boy. So the chayra guys, you have the same din, except one is a real chatzar and one is an evet chatzar. So now you have to ask the question, what? B'tzricha. Why do you have to tell me both cases? B'tzricha. Diyash min an eved, havamina dafka eved, dafka an eved. Avu chatzar ligzam mishum chatzeira habola achamikan. I might think that what you're worried about chatzeira habola achamikan. Let's see, he puts it the guy's a get. This is what he does. He puts the get in a chatzar, sells it to a guy, and then the guy sells it to the isha. Then she won't be divorced. That's the case of chatzera bola achamikan. After you put the get in, it has to be goes from him to her, not for him to shleim it to her. Okay, so I would think by chatzera you're worried about that. Kamashmon, you're not. V'yashmin chatzera, only the case of chatzera, not the case of eved. Havamina dafka chatzera. I would say dafka chatzera. I will eved, but by an eved. Ligzer kafus atashena kafus. In other words, it's such a small criteria. He has to be sleeping and he has to be tied up. Kamash Malon, you're not worried about it. That's the chiddush. Okay. Rabbi says Rabbi Michdi. Chatza mehechi Rabbi. Where do we know chatza from? Where do we know from, guys? Just take a look at. Mostly you don't have it. Okay. It's volume 2. Anyway, so the sugi is you learn chatza mitam yad. You know, it says the chasla of sefer krisis b'nosan biyada, and you put it in her hand, and we say a chatzah is similar to a hand. The chatzah is similar to a hand. That's the source. So it said, "Ma yada the isya bein midaita bein bal karcha." Her hand is bein midaita bein bal karcha. Achatzera the isya bein midaita bein bal karcha. So to the chatzah, her chatzah, right? You have no choice. Just like your hand, you have no choice. If you divorce her with the hand, she has no choice. Guys, can you, and before the Chaim Rabbeinu Gershon, can men divorce the wife against the will? Yes. You take the get, you put her in her hand. Does she has an option of taking it or not taking it? No. So therefore, chutz is similar to that. It would work sai midaita and sai bal karcha against the will. It would work. Because again, your source is yad. So chatzah has to be just like yad, and just like your yad, you can force it. So to what chatzah you could force it. Now v'hamatana, right? when he wants to give her this chatzar as a matana, midaita isya bal karcha lesa. She might say, sayna matana sichya. I don't want your thing. So Abaya disagrees with Rava, guys. Abaya says in the case of chatzar, where you go ahead and even in the case of Evet, we should go ahead and refuse the matana, right? Then she won't be divorced. She won't be divorced because the whole way chatzar is working is mitam yad, and since mitam yad is what is, you have to have the option of midaita bal karcha. Lacking the two, when we're not going to bal karcha, she's not forced, and therefore the chatzar is not a chatzar, and therefore the get's not a get. Maskul of Simi Rashi, but shlichus lekabala, a shliach lekabala, the midaita isya bal karcha lesa. Shlichus lekabala to be makabel the get is with her das, but not against the will. The kahavi shliach lekabala, right? And nonetheless, what it's a shliach lekabala. We're going to learn from v'shulcha koreve v'shulcha b'lei mapikei v'sholach, and he can go ahead and send to her. So what do you see? You see shlichus, even though it's not bal karcha, it's bal karcha. Nonetheless, the shliach works. So too over here, even though the chutz is bal karcha, it should work. The matan is bal karcha, it should work. But by the shlichus miyada is Rabbi. Do you learn shlichus miyad? Shlichus mi v'shilach v'shilcha is Rabbi. It's a whole different source. So since it's a different source, it can work bal karcha. By same as shlichus kabbalah nami ashken bal karcha, you even find shlichus bal karcha shekain av mekabel get lebita katana bal karcha. A father can be mekabel to get of his daughter against his will. Okay, that's the sugya. Russia prokem of the sugya. We said you can write an alizayis, but only if it's disattached. Alizayis only if it's disattached. On the keren of a parah, you have to give over the parah. On the yad of an eved, you'd have to give over the eved. Right now, why alizayis? Now, just for look at the top places before we begin the sugya. Look at the top places. It says Shaykh El the Mishnah Yotes Al Ali Shal Zayis Dafka Ali Shal Zayis Dafka, the leaf of an olive Uchayotzeba the Miskayim, that it's going to go ahead and continue to exist. Kiditanya B'Taisefta Al Olish Al Zayis B'Charuth Udalas. These are carobs, or is a gourd. The whole davu shall kayama kasha. Abel oli shall krishin leek. But sailing and onions, the ole vradim, roses, the ole yerakos, the vegetables, the chavishen mekayim puzzle. In other words, they didn't just pick any vegetation. They picked ali shel zayas. They mamish meant the zayas. Why? Because the zayas, it's going to stay. Yeah, it's going to stay. So now, bishleim yada eved, you have to give over the eved lei efsha the mekatzia. It's not possible to go ahead and cut it off. Says Rashi, the shayach b'mitzvos. He's shaykh mitzvah, so you don't have a right to go ahead and make a chabal on him. And if you do, he's going to go up Rashi Evarim, forget to get Alma, ain't Rashi Lachba. See, you don't remember just to touch him. So Mela, I understand why you have to give him over. Just cut off the horn and give it to her. So Makra, it says v'chasa v'nasan la. It says v'chasa v'nasan la. It has the act of kasiva followed by the act of nesina. Mishein mechusar al kasiva v'nesina. Yatzazeh. This would exclude this case. Shemechusar kasiva ketzitza v'nesina. You'd have to have the act of ketzitza between the kasiva and the nesina. So therefore, it would not be good. But basically, he said that whether it's food or a living thing, it's no good. Even if it's not a problem of mechuber. In other words, disattaching it still won't be good. Even if it's disattached, it won't be good. Even if you cut off the part, you give over the whole para, it won't be good. Even if you give over the eved, it won't be good. Because he has a pasuk. My time at WSA, we lead the Tanya. Sefer creases, sefer, only ela sefer. Minayin l'rabbis kol davar. How do you know what kol davar? Sefer is mashma klaf. How do you know the kol davar? Tam loim b'chasav lo mikol makam. Says Rashi. The chasav lo mikol makam midloi kasiv v'nasan sefer creases. When it doesn't say v'nasan sefer creases, but v'chasav sefer creases, it's dafka b'chol makam. And came out tam loim sefer. If anything, why you write a sefer? And if a kasav tells me anything, right? When you could have said v'nasan, guys. The chasav tells me anything because you could have said v'nasan. Therefore, sefer is anything, correct? Why do you have to tell me klaf? Mas sefer klaf davar shein b'ruach chayim is not alive. It's not a food. So this is like a cloud pratistical, guys, right? You're going ahead and tightening up. What can you write it on? Anything. But anything that's similar to what? To Sefer. Just like a Sefer, a klaf, doesn't have life force to it. Just like it doesn't, it's not an oichel. So too, something that's what? An oichel. So therefore this would preclude a para, an alezayas, and it would preclude an eved. Rabbanon. Now, because of bas sefer, if it would say bas sefer, because of la bas sefer, kedekarmit, then I would say you're right that we go ahead and use sefer as the paradigm of what you're supposed to go ahead and use to try to get on. Hashna dechsiv sefer. Now that it says sefer creases, it's the serious devarim huda asa. It's comes go ahead and tell us that it has to be what a serious devarim. It has to go ahead and tell over the story that he's divorcing her. Rabbanon, hi b'chasam ayavilei. Now the Rabbanon, they obviously don't learn b'chasam mikol makom, right? They don't learn anything, right? So therefore, what do they do with it? She's divorced with ksiva, but she's not divorced what? With gerushin. And I think you make a hekesh between havaya and yitzia. Guys, the chassid sefer creases, v'nasim biyada. She'll go out and she'll go to another man. So that's what we make a hekesh between Yitzia, leaving the first husband, and Yitzia and Havaya coming to the second husband. Just like the second husband is with Kesef, so too what? The Yitzia will be Kesef. Ma Havaya be Kesef, Yitzia be Kesef. Kamash Malon, that not. Who's giving the Kesef, guys? What would you say? Who's by divorce? Who's giving the Kesef? What would you say? You'd say the husband gives the kesef?
Let's say the other way. Whatever it is,
she wants to get it out.
It's a glad thing in Torah. You know what? You told him my statistical study of Torah, right? I set you up. Who's paying for? Who pays for the get? She does. Who needs to get free? She does. Who should have to pay? So let's see Rashi. It says Rashi. The Eina Miskaresha B'Kesef. Im Amallah, if he says her, Helich Pruta Viskashili Ba. Take this Pruta and be Miskarish me. So Rashi agrees with you. So the kasha is, why didn't Rashi agree with me? Who's the one who has to get free? Right? She does. She's the one who has to change the status quo. She should have to give the Kesef, right? So that that's the kash. The Velt asks this kash on Rashi. The Sfas Emes answers beautifully. He says that where do we know that kesef would work? From where? From kedushin. By kedushin, who gives it? He does. So Mamela, since the whole side of what that kesef might work is the hekesh to what? To kedushin, I'd say kesef by Yitzia also, even though mechanically she's the one who should have to give it, she's the one who has to literally buy a freedom, she's the one who has to get out. But since the hekesh, the source for kesef would be kedushin, just like kedushin he gives it, so too says the Sfas Emes, but we give it as well.
The opposite. The kedushin is to get into it.
Again, you're right. You're right. He's making the king to acquire her. She wants to get out. That's the kasha. That's the kasha. The kasha is the tamsis. But the answer is where you wouldn't think kesef in the first place because the Torah writes the chassav sefer krisis. Right? So where's the havamin is only from kedushin.
Parsha says when Yosan, it just makes sense that he has to give her. If she's giving money, where's the Yosan? What does he give her? Give her nothing.
No, so I'd say if
I'm taking this money and you're divorced, that doesn't make sense.
No, so he's saying the following. Why do you need the word rat v'chosav to say to write something? No, you wouldn't have v'chosav. The nasan, right? The nasan law.
The nasan laws. He has to give something to her.
I hear. Then that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. But l'chayra in Kinyanim, the Parsha of Kinyanim, it makes sense. What? I hear what you're saying. I'm not baita.
Who says the yatzmi base so yes,
No, again, guy, I'm speaking you in svara. A mechanics. It's very easy to say to man. That's the svara to say to man. In mechanics, it makes sense to woman. And the whole, again, Sfasema says, he doesn't say nothing, he says the heck is over here. Now, says the Gemara Vaita. Salka, I mean, Akish Silavaya, my Vaita, Kesav, Yitzid, I'm Kesav, Mashman. V'idach Nafgale, where does Rabbi Yossi Aglui know this from? Nafgale may say for creases, and it says may say for creases, say for kursa, bein dava acha kursa. V'idach, and what the Chachamim do? V'boile dava karis ben olaveina. It has to be something, it has to be final. You can't have what, you can't have anything binding after the get is given. There's nothing that can bind them to his house. This is your get. I'm not saying you don't drink wine. I'm not sure to the base of Yichud. You could home to daddy. Lo'ilam ain't a crisis. Why? Because she's bound by him. That's not a safer course. She's not. That's not cut off. At shloishim yaim, I was a crisis because it has it has limitation. The idach. Mikaris krisis. When it could have said karis, it says krisis. The other one karis krisis like Arshi. And the Chacham, they don't dash karis krisis like Rabbi Yossi. Very good. Says the Mishnah. Ain't kaisim in mechubel karka. You can't write on mechubel karka something that's mechubel karka. One cannot write a get on. Kasu bin mechuber. If you do write the get on mechuber, now that makes any sense. You just told me you can't. And in the same breath, you tell me what happens if you do. Kasu bin mechuber told you disattach it. The chasmu and you sign it. The nasan la kasha. I don't understand. You just tell me you can't write again mechuber. Now, in the same breath, you tell me it's bidi evidence kosher. Rabbi Yehuda paisel. Rabbi Yehuda says it's pasul. Actually, this is it has to be chasima. This is the Tana, guys. If you might recall, right? We went early in the Masechta. We said, who's the Tana who needs ksiva v'chasima l'shma? If it's Reb Eliezer, you only need the kasiva. If it's Reb Meir, you only need the chasima. So we gave two terutzim. One, it's Reb Eliezer. Reb Eliezer might have mezuyach misaychai. It would be no good. And therefore, if you have the wrong people sign, but not l'shma, it won't be good. The Rav Ashi gave a teretz. The oilam it's Rabbi Yehuda. So there it is, Rabbi Yehuda, right over here. The Gemara, yes. Why we try to make like Meir? Stamish Meir. Why Rabbi Elazar? Because halacha is Rabbi Elazar and Gitin in this halacha. But you might remember that. Okay, Shavuos night because at school. Anyway, so now over here. So this is Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseru Aimer ein koisvin loyal niyor hamachuk. You can't write it on a piece of paper that was erased. Loyal diftera. We'll see what that is. We'll see what difter is. It's a type of cloth. Mifneshu yachal is dayif. You're able to go ahead and forge or erase and get rid of a tanai, perhaps. The Chacham machshirim. The Chacham will say it's kosher. Okay, we'll focus on that tomorrow on the latter part of the Mishnah. Let's go back to the first part of the Mishnah. First part of the Mishnah is goshver. You just told me you can't write a get what on. You can't on mechub, and then you say the same breath you could. Now, guys, outside. There's two parts to a get. There is the typhus. The typhus is boilerplate. That's the part. Boilerplate is a fancy word for. It's a standard. The standard. You know, when you go to sell your chametz, the Rav has this boilerplate, and then there's the parts you fill in, the name, the places. That's called the tyrif. The tyrif and the typhus. Okay. So now, like Rebbe Elazar. Rebbe Elazar was the Edi Mesira Karti. Do we care about the chasima? No. Why do we care about the ksiva? So, in order, like Rebbe Elazar, the hakpada should be that the tyrif should not be written in when it's connected to the ground. It should not be written when it's connected to the ground, right? It shouldn't be, because that would be a psul. Like Reb Meir, write the whole thing. Disattach it. As long as the Adam sign, when it's disattached, it should work. So we're going to try to fit in both this pshotim in the Mishnah, okay? So again, the first clause in the Mishnah, don't write. Second clause, b'di'evid. If you write, it works. So that's what we're going to fit in Rebbe Elazar into that b'di'evid. I'm going to fit Rebbe Meir into that b'di'evid. Guys, let's see it. Says the Gemara. How can you say if you're on a mechuber and you're signing to give it over, it works? You just told me you can't do it. You left over the essential part of the get. You left over the name of the man, the name of the woman, the name of the city. V'chein amar Rabbi Elazar, amar Rabbi Oishia, u'sheshayim makam ha'toyref. V'chein amar Rabbi Chanan, Rabbi Yochanan, u'sheshayim makam ha'toyref. Rabbi Elazar, he dama edi masira karti. And v'hachi kamar, ein koisvin toifis. Don't write boilerplate. You know why? Even though there's no problem with that, because Shema Yichtav Tayrif, and then there is a problem with that, because my Hakpada, Edi Masira, is on the Ksiva. And therefore, Kosvul Taif is B'di'evet. If you do write the boilerplate, the Tolshu, when you disattach it, Kasvu l'toyrif, and you write the toyrif v'nasul l'kasha. Let's go back to the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, and koisim v'mechubel l'karka. Do not write the toyrif. Don't write the toifis, because you may come to write the toyrif. Kasvu b'mechuber, but if you did write the toifis b'mechuber, tells you disattached it and then wrote the toyrif, v'chasvu v'nasul l'kasha. That's the first pshat. Good. Back in the Gemara. Reish Lakish Amar chasmu shaninu. Look at the guys. Look at the lashon in the Mishnah. Talshu v'chasmu v'nasnu. Talshu v'chasmu meaning like your pshat. You didn't take into account chasim at all, but the Mishnah did. The Mishnah said talshu v'chasmu. Therefore, Reish Lakish did not like that pshat. Reish Lakish Amar chasmu shaninu. Reb Meyahi the Amar Edi Mesira Karti. So, guys, now let's figure out the Mishnah. Okay, you in other words, what? So, in other words, don't write anything mechuber. Why? Because you may come to sign it. What happens if you write the whole thing b'mechuber and then disattach and sign it? You got it. You got pshat. Now you got both pshatim in the Mishnah. Says Reish Lakish. Amar chas mishino. Rabbi Damar Edi Chsim Karti. V'achim Amar. Ein kaisvin toyrif gezeir shema yachdoim. Don't write the toyrif, the man's name, women. Maybe you may come to sign it. Chasvul toyrif. If you did finish the get, you wrote the boilerplate and the toyrif. Talshu, and you disattach with chasmu, you find it. V'nasul kasher. After all, everything is great. Good. Let's finish to the two dots. Kasvu al cheretz shel atzitz nakov. If you wrote a get on the cheretz of an atzitz nakov. Now, no. This you have to listen for a second because it's very interesting. An atzitz nakov means you have a flower pot that has a hole in it, and we can view it as mechuber because the nutrients are going through the hole. If you're writing on the cheres of the atzitz nakov, there's no difference whether it's nakov or ain't a nakov. It doesn't make a difference, okay? It doesn't make a difference. So, be medayik the lashon. If you write the get on the pot itself, kasha, it's kasha. The shakale, you take it, v'yavla nehala, and you give it to her. You know why? Because it's not mechuba. It's not mechuba. We don't view the cheretz as mechuba. Okay, so what's the whole reason we learned cheretz shel atzis nakov? Says the Ritva, because of the case we're going to say now. We learn because we're saying now. Al ala shel atzis nakov. If you wrote it on the leaf of an atzis nakov, now it's attached to the ground through the hole. Abaya Amma kasha. Abaya says it's kasha. Rav Amma pasel, and Rav says it's pasel. Abaya Amma kasha. The shakale. You take the atzitz and you give it to her. You're taking the eved, you're giving it to her. You're taking the para, you're giving it to her. Rav Amar pasel gezera shemer yakdoim. Right? Maybe what you would come to go ahead and yakdum and cut the Allah. It's a gezera. Says Rashi shema yakdum ha'Allah v'havi kitzitzim in amechubar. So therefore, it's the gezera. Taking the pot and giving it over is not a problem. It's the same thing, right? It's taking the whole, taking the cow, you wrote it on the horn, right? Don't cut the horn off. You wrote it on this. That doesn't seem to be an act of disattachment, even though halachically we'll view it mechubal in shmita, maybe but there's no ketzitza. The act of, since when you pick it up, there's no ketzitza. There's nothing chilik between the v'chosav and menasa. Meir is sitting there saying one sentence. It's still attached to the ground. Okay, that's what you're thinking.
I'm not with the they're on the par also. Why?
No, I don't think because people don't cut off the hands of an evidence. People do cut the horn of a cow. People do cut off a leaf.
Not over here. Only this mechubi cut.
Right?
Only this mechubi.
Okay. No, I'm saying, but that's the ketzitza, not mechubi. No, that's the act of ketzitza. You're right. Linear ketzitza. You're right. But then you're picking it up and giving it over. It's not ketzitza. That not be ketzitza.
Sure.